Today on the Coach's Why podcast, we have a very special guest. He was a two-time state placer in the sport of wrestling in the state of Pennsylvania. He then took his talents to the next level, playing under James Franklin at Penn State as a defensive lineman. When that time came to an end, he transferred to UNC Pembroke, where he finished out his career wrestling. He is now an assistant coach at Stevens Institute of Technology. Today, on the Coach's Why podcast, we welcome Ryan Monk. With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches. We're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coach's Why podcast.
That was my Coach's Why.
Welcome back to another Coach's Why podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We have Coach Ryan Monk from a different school from when we first initially talked to you, Stevens Institute of Technology. Is that correct?
Correct.
Perfect. Okay. Coach, I appreciate you jumping on today, man. It's awesome to have you come back.
Thanks for having me, and it's great to be able to reconnect and chit chat a little bit and talk some shop, hopefully.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. For anybody who's listening, I shouldn't say come back. I said come back as if you've been on here before, but I should say the opportunity to reconnect as well. You and me, I don't even know how long ago it was, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, somewhere in there. We're kind of reaching out, talking about getting some kids to the next level, and I appreciate you keeping my number in your phone. I know you've changed schools since then. What was the I guess reason, quote unquote, that had you go from where you were to Stevens?
Yeah, I was a graduate assistant at Baldwin Wallace. So I mean, once you're done with your master's, it's kind of like, hey, buddy, go fly the coop.
Yeah.
Get out.
You're
get
a
out
peacock.
of here.
You got to let you fly. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get out there and figure it out. So, but yeah, once you're done, when you're a GA, you're part-time. Well, there's nothing in this racket that's part-time, right?
Right.
But you're part-time in your studies and your job. But yeah, when you're done with your master's, it's like, hey, go get your first full-time job, you know? Right.
How's that been to transition to that full-time gig for you?
Honestly, for me, it's been pretty easy. I started off as like a student assistant and put in a bunch of time, even as a student assistant. And then as a graduate assistant, I put in a bunch of time. So in terms of the time, it's really no different.
Right.
The only thing that is different is maybe the level of involvement. When it comes to decisions, when it comes to, where we go, how we do it, why we do it, that sort of thing. You know, as a GA, as a student assistant, I was really there to fill the gaps or help out with this or help out with that, or take the charge with this or take the charge with that. Not to say that I wasn't learning, but it's just a different level of involvement in the decisions and how much time they take and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Okay. And I have a question for you, kind of about the future for it, but I'll save that for a little bit later. Before we dive into your coaching journey, and I know you just kind of told us, but before we kind of dive into more of that philosophies and some of your stuff on the coaching side, I kind of want to talk about you as the person. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass the baton over to you to kind of let everybody know kind of where you grew up, and when you got involved in the sport of wrestling and how that kind of transpired to, from youth to now.
Yeah. I grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania. It's Grand Wilkes-Barre, a little town north of Wilkes-Barre called Dallas. And I started wrestling at a relatively early age. That's in Pennsylvania. That's just kind of what you do.
Right.
If you're not playing basketball, you're wrestling. So, and I found out really quick how bad I was at basketball too. But I learned how to like Granby roll and how to like hit a drop step in the living room of my grandfather's house, my grandparents' home. That's who kind of taught me how to get in a stance and cement jobs and, all this stuff.
Right.
And just kind of went from there and really got serious about it in high school. And placed at the state tournament twice and, in Pennsylvania, AAA, and as a heavyweight, I'd wrestle in the off season a lot of freestyle, Greco, the whole thing. And I was also playing football as well. Heavyweights in high school are usually both.
Right.
But I definitely took wrestling very seriously. And I'd probably in an off season, man, wrestle, close to 150, 200 matches. Right up. And I would wrestle. I mean, football season would end, wrestling would start, and I would wrestle right up until doubles started. And then I'd get into football. And I did not play football or I did not wrestle in college right away. I got a walk-on opportunity at Penn State to go play football there for a couple of years. So I packed my bags and went to State College from 2015 to 2017. I was a D lineman, played a little, got a couple snaps, nothing major, right? And was on some great teams there. And then ultimately that wasn't like a great fit for a number of reasons. And I took a year off from school, took a year off from athletics, and worked for my family. And then once everything was kind of on the straight and narrow, I transitioned and transferred to a Division II school down in North Carolina, UNC Pembroke, and wrestled for O.T. Johnson, who's a legendary Division II coach who really gave me my start in coaching. Then graduated from there, and Ohio, now New Jersey, and
now you're here,
we're all over. Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
How was that? How was that growing up wrestling in high school, knowing that Pennsylvania, and I know there's always this debate of which state's the toughest state to compete in, right? In the high school sports and when it comes to wrestling, and I can't say I've obviously I didn't grow up there, so I don't know. I know you probably brag about PA being the toughest. How was that? Qualifying and placing at the PA tournament. Knowing that that's such a prestigious tournament really across the country, how did, you took a year out, you didn't wrestle right away. So like, did you have a recruiting process in high school and you just decided not to do it or what made you not go to the next level right away for wrestling, knowing that you probably could have wrestled anywhere knowing what you did in high school?
Yeah. I did have a recruiting process. At 18, it was very hard to tell me anything. I wasn't very open-minded, right? I'm just being honest. Yeah. I had Division II and Division III interests. I just, knowing what I know now, I would have picked up the phone, right? But I didn't. And I went on some mid-major Division I visits to a couple different places, and those were all great and dandy. But when you grow up in Pennsylvania, Penn State is that's the place that everybody wants to be. And
right.
If you play football, if you play high school football in Pennsylvania, and you get a call saying, "Hey, we want you to come walk on," no one in the state of Pennsylvania is going to tell Coach Franklin no.
I was going to ask that if you played for Coach Franklin. Yeah,
I did. Cool. Yeah. So we were his first official recruiting class. But I was dead set. So funny story. After my junior year, I did the semi-slide at the state tournament. I was dead set on wrestling in college. I was like, I'm not getting any football looks. This whole football thing is not working out. My goal from the age of 5 was to play football at Penn State. Right. I had it taped on the ceiling in my bedroom at home from the time I was 7 to, when I ended up walking on there. Right. I was I'm wrestling in college. This whole football thing's not working out. And I went to a camp, did really, really well. Recruiting coordinator, Ricky Ronnie goes, "Hey, Coach wants to talk to you." I'm like, "Who's Coach?" He's like, "Coach Franklin, dude." Coach,
wow. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, "Sweet. All right." So we went up and met with Coach Franklin. He's like, "Hey, I want you to walk on." And I was like, "Well, where do I sign?" He's like, you basically just committed. So from that point on, it was really just waiting until my senior year was over to sign the papers and do all that stuff.
Yeah. How was that playing for Coach Franklin, right? Obviously knowing where that was, like you said, his first recruiting class. But knowing what he's done now, I mean, is that something that you have in your holster of bragging about? Hey, I got to play for Coach Franklin, and or was it just what was that experience like? I guess we'll just start there. What was from the time you walked on campus? Obviously, we all know Penn State has iconic wideouts and stuff like that, right? What was your experience like from the moment you stepped on campus to the time that you decided to leave Penn State?
Yeah. It was incredible. Just the level of a commitment that the school has for football and just like the ins and outs of everything. Like it's a job. It's a full-time job. And I loved every second of it, and that's where I wanted to be. And like, maybe that first year I really had to pinch myself, saying like, oh my God, I'm like actually here. So yeah, Coach Franklin, like, is by far like the best communicator I've ever been around, knows what to say at the right time, at the right place. Right. And loves his guys to death and loves every single guy in that program and in that building, and shows it. And I think I learned a lot. Right. I think, those core values that they talk about, positive attitude, work ethic, sacrifice, and competing. Those are still 4 core values that like I think about to this day and I try to live up to. That's how like deeply embedded that experience was in me. Yeah, I mean, It's like burned into my brain, like compete.
Yeah.
But like that's just in my brain. So in terms of that, like it just is an unbelievable experience, and had unbelievable teammates, had a great, first year wasn't the best, but second, third year, obviously we were one of the best teams in the country. But just being a part of all that was really grateful and an incredible experience.
For sure. So whenever you look back at like your life of athletics from high school to even like your grandpa teaching you in your grandpa's floor, right? To college, wrestling, high school, whatever sport you want to talk about, what coach made the biggest impact on your life? Who was he or she, and why?
That is a great question. It's hard to give you one.
And I've had you can dive into as many as you want.
Yeah,
it's completely up to you. But yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I've had, even whenever I do my solo podcast and stuff, I've talked about it. I mean, I have a minimum 3 that I can say off the top of my head.
Correct.
So yeah, it's hard to say just one, but so feel free to dive into as many as you like.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're coaches in the sense that maybe you and I are, but my parents, just their level of sacrifice for me and my 2 older brothers and our family, how they worked, how they showed up to work every day, and what they did for us as kids is unbelievable. And I really don't know how they did it with 3 boys. It's incredible to think about, right? But like, and then the way they loved us and continue to love us, right? And just be there and be super supportive of everything, and also be hard on us and teach us about accountability and teach us about work ethic and teach us about, doing the little things that make a big difference. Like just those little things. So probably number 1, my mom and dad. I would say number 2, like, probably my college wrestling coach, O.T. Johnson. He gave me a chance when nobody else would. He gave me a second chance to pursue wrestling and pursue a degree, which was really, really important to me, that I finish up my degree. Really, really important to my parents as well. And there were a lot of schools that weren't answering emails, but he did. And he stayed with me through a very long and lengthy recruiting process that wasn't easy because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And from the outset, I could just tell that he loved it. He loved me and he cared about me and still does. And that's why I coach now. But and then, I've had, like my coaches at Penn State, I'd like to think of Sean Spencer as another guy who's the D-line coach and unbelievable run game coordinator. And then also just like our super funny guy, like, but knew how to like turn the switch on and off.
Oh, right,
Like
right.
you'd walk into a team meeting or walk into the meeting room, the D line room, he'd like crack a joke, but then all of a sudden he's going to get on you.
Right.
And then, but also like, as he's getting on you, like he's kind of making you laugh. So it's like not that bad, but you also are learning at the same time. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's a good mixture.
Good mixture. Yeah. You don't run into those guys often. So, and I even try to have some humor, but sometimes it fails. Especially I try, but like, but yeah, like those would be some of the, and I think my high school wrestling coach, Mike Richards, and another guy by the name of Bob Roper, who was a D-line, O-line coach in my high school, taught me how to lift hard,
Yeah.
move heavy
important.
weight. Yeah. And how to do it when you're sore and tired. And so I'd say that was, that's probably, but I could go on, right? But those are the ones that come to mind that just, stick out in a lot of various ways.
For sure. So while you were kind of in your timeline of I know you said that, actually we'll go back to you saying that your recruiting process with Coach OT. What made you decide that you wanted to go back to wrestling after you spent 3 years playing football at the highest level, to where you're like, I want to go wrestle again? What made you, for one, choose to do that? And then, what was your deciding factor to go to Coach OT?
Yeah. I think, well, like wrestling's always just been important and to me and to my family in a way. And it never really left me. Like even when I was playing ball, like I would I still kept a flow account. Like, so I would watch like U20s and U23s, and I'd watch U18. Like I'd watch it all.
Yeah.
And I'd watch Fargo and like just keep up to date with like what's going on. I'd watch the mid-major Division I matches. Like I just did, the Big Tens, the Big 12. Like I kept up to date with it because it was kind of an escape from football, like just something different to watch. And I had teammates that I played with who were all also walk-ons and also like guys that placed at the state tournament in wrestling. So like we would chit chat about wrestling,
Yeah.
And so it just never kind of left me. And it always just intrigued me. Like, if the opportunity ever presented itself, do I think I could still do this? Right. And when my time was up, that was the first thing. I was like, I'm done with football. I've had my fill. Like, football is just it's a different animal. It's you got 120 guys on a roster, and it's you can get lost. You can get lost quick, which certainly I did, and to nobody else's fault either. And I just felt like with wrestling that I could actually get a chance to be the guy, right. Like even if I'm not the guy at another place, at least I can prove it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Whereas
you
with
have a better
football,
chance.
Correct. With football, there's this and there's that, and like with wrestling, it's like you win your head-to-head matchup, and like that's it. Like
that's a big thing about wrestling for sure.
Correct. So, and then OT, again, like I kind of met OT through like some middle guys, like just the guy that was the athletic trainer at UNC Pembroke. I happened to wrestle with in high school.
Okay.
And he had heard that I wanted to wrestle. We're family friends. All of a sudden I'm on the phone with Billy, and then I'm on the phone with the assistant coach, Juan Simpson, and, we're chopping it up. And then, all of a sudden OT picks up the phone, and like, I just kind of went through like 3 people all at once.
Yeah.
And I had looked at their website and had seen how successful they had been the year prior to me getting there. They had a national finalist, and they had an All-American, and they had a national finalist and an All-American, and maybe another person on the podium. I had 3 All-Americans that year. You have to double check me, but and they were on a trajectory to do really well. And change of scenery, North Carolina, went down, loved my visit, loved the area. And really just, again, like OT's recruiting. Like he wasn't on me all the time. Like he kind of gave me some space, which I kind of probably needed. But he made a commitment to me, even though he wasn't really sure whether I was going to get there or not. Like he was like, yeah, if you come here, great. If you don't, no big deal. Like, I'm not going to change your mind. Like that to me was very refreshing. And I was like, yeah, this guy cares. I could just feel it. I don't know. I can just feel it.
No, yeah. While you were at Penn State, I mean, knowing that you're like, I kind of want to go wrestle again. And once you decided football was done, obviously if you don't know Penn State wrestling, you guys need to look it up. But you obviously had Kale there, right? And you where you're at. Was that kind of a thought process, considering like maybe to try to go to, you're already there. Did you consider maybe going to try to make that team?
Man, I was not good enough for that program. That's for sure. No, not really. I think I was kind of also, it was a mix of things. I was done with football, but also, football was kind of sort of done with me too. And because, I won't get into too many specifics, but I made a lot of mistakes as a young man between the ages of 18 to 21. And that's also a part of the reason I coach too, right? Because I can see very quickly when young men between the ages of 18 and 21 are doing the wrong things. And, they were done with me too, right? So that's a whole nother story for another time.
Yeah, another time for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my days at Penn State were over for sure, and I definitely wasn't skilled enough for that type of team. I mean, at that time, like they were still unbelievably incredible.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe not the teams that they have right now, right? But
they were still rolling. Yeah, they were. Correct. For sure. So, I mean, that's so crazy. I didn't know all this stuff about you, man. That's so cool that you got to play there and that's where you went and all that. Obviously, you went to, or I should say, you wrestled under Coach OT, and you did that for 2 years, right? 2 years.
I started my third year, but had to medically retire, so 2 years. Yeah,
2 years. Okay. You mentioned he gave you the opportunity to be a GA and coach with him there. But when was it that you decided that you wanted to coach, right? After your career, you did football, you did all this stuff, you wrestled for him, got hurt. Was coaching something you always wanted to do, or was it just kind of like it fell into your lap? When did you decide that you wanted to do this?
I wanted to coach. I just wanted to probably coach at the high school level. I was really, really interested in being I was a secondary education major. And, I wanted to teach. I was like, well, I'll just coach. I'll teach so that I can coach football and wrestling at the high school level. I could do both. But then kind of learning from OT, and learning more about the college wrestling scene in Division II, Division III, I can probably just coach wrestling full time and not have to do anything else. So That would be really cool. Cause that just kind of came about one day. I don't really know how. I think it was a very slow, long process. I kind of went from secondary ed to maybe strength and conditioning coach. And then all of a sudden it was just you know what? I think head wrestling coach one day is where I want to be. And it had a lot to do with OT. It had a lot to do with Coach Blaze Shade, who's there. He's now the head coach at King. It had a lot to do with Juan and Coach Colburn, and a lot of the department there at UNC Pembroke. So it just kind of came organically, and then when I had to hang it up, I was just you know what, I'm just going to be a sponge and learn everything I possibly can and see what happens.
Right. So when was this? When did your GA program start? So I guess kind of how long have you been coaching? And did you go directly from there to where you're at now, or was there kind of a middle ground somewhere?
Yeah. So student assistant at Pembroke started in November of 2021.
Okay.
After it was hey, Ryan, you probably shouldn't wrestle again, competitively at least. So I was there for a year, and then just as a student assistant, and then I was GA at Baldwin Wallace from 2022 to 2024 or whatever. So 2 years there. That's where we got to talk on the phone, and then just took the job at Stevens as a full-time assistant in July, I guess, June, July.
Right.
So 4 years.
4 years of coaching. So what do you, which I'll ask that question here in a little bit. What do you love about coaching and what do you dislike about it? Is there anything that you dislike about it? Especially now that you've went from student to GA to actually an assistant, right? You're starting to get more and more workload, as you mentioned, things like that. Is there anything that you're starting to quote unquote dislike, or is it just kind of like overall love of the profession?
I would, people tell me I'm crazy when I say this, but I would do this for free. I really would. And I don't, you love it. Yeah. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, I told somebody that not that long ago. I was like, do it for free. How are you going to pay your bills? And I'm like, well, relax. It's it's a metaphor,
figure
right?
Of speech. Yeah.
It's a figure of speech. But if they called today and said, hey, like, we're in a pinch, we need you to do this for free for 2 months or whatever. Like, I don't think I wouldn't question it. I really love it. Are there days that there's just a lot going on? For sure. And it gets really stressful, and it's time to like prioritize and manage your stress level, and, also do that and pour into the guys and help coach and do this and do that. Like, there are those days, but it's never, man, this sucks. I dislike it. But I like all aspects of it. There's just certain aspects I'm not like the best at, like director of ops stuff, like hotels and buses and stuff like that. I'm starting to do that stuff. And like, my brain is detailed, but not detailed in that way. So but I'm learning. Right. And I'm doing things now that I haven't done before, and I'm growing, and it's really awesome. Oddly enough, I would like to say that I thoroughly enjoy the recruiting process, probably the most. Most coaches would say the opposite probably. But there's nothing like getting to meet a kid, meet his family, get to know about him. And, whether they come to Stevens or not, like, of course we want them to come to Stevens, right? But we're not going to get everybody. That's just the reality of it. But then, maybe they go on to another place and they do really well. That's like, just stuff like that is cool. Like, just getting to know people. Like, I really, I genuinely like people.
You're right.
And if you don't like people, man, coach is going to be a tough profession for you.
I agree. Yeah. Do you think that, and you mentioned that some coaches don't like the recruiting, and I have heard that. I've done a few with coaches, and some coaches like, I hate the recruiting process, and some say that it's one of their favorite things. And, for me, my goal is to get to a college level. That's just my goal. I'd love to coach collegiately. And me personally, I think that recruiting is going to be one of my favorite things to do, right? I mean, I kind of hopefully, maybe it didn't show, but that's why I reached out to you and all the coaches I did about getting kids out, not only because I want them to have the opportunity, right, because they have talent to go and blah, blah, blah down the line of the reason behind the kids individually, but as like a coach, I love the recruiting process, right? And I think that that'd be something I would enjoy when it comes to that. Do you find as that you've getting more and more into that role and you're doing that, what is there a lot of difficulty in doing that? Like, are you staying close to home? Obviously I'm sure that's the first place you look, but are you guys staying like locally, regionally? Are you guys looking across the country? I mean, what do you find difficult about recruiting when it comes to trying to find kids?
Yeah, great question. We are a very particular type of school, right? We're an institute technology, so we're a polytechnical school. So it meant anything computer science, engineering, that's what we do here. We're hands-on. And then business is also rapidly growing, just because our location, we're right in Hoboken. And I mean, I could walk outside the office and go upstairs and go a block and I see Manhattan.
Right.
And it's an unbelievable location. So we pull a lot from Northern New Jersey. That's kind of our demographic. And we pulled from Long Island before, and maybe different parts of New York. And we pull a lot from Eastern Pennsylvania as well. You'll see on our roster, we got a smattering of guys from the Eastern PA, Southeast PA. But then we'll also pull nationally because of our academic prowess.
Right.
We are kind of like a mini Ivy League in a way.
Right.
So, especially in a sport like wrestling, like we're already looking at a very, very small percentage of the population of wrestling, as compared to maybe other sports where, high GPAs are just like all over the place. If that makes sense. Wrestling's just, it's a different type of sport.
It is.
It's generally speaking. So we're already looking at like a very select kind of kid
athlete.
And so in a lot of ways that kind of helps us because the recruiting load is definitely not nearly as much as what I've been involved with in the past.
Right.
But then again, it kind of comes with other challenges. Obviously we're an expensive school, right? Our sticker price is, what it is. Now, no one ever pays that, right? But
sound like a car salesman right now. Don't worry about the tag you see on there. Don't worry about that.
Don't pay any attention behind the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is true. I mean, that's the nature of any school in the United States. Like you're never going to pay full sticker price anywhere. So, it comes with maybe that challenge where like, there's a guy you'd really, really like to get, but academically, like he's not going to make it.
Right.
Academically, he can't get into the school. So that's a little bit different than maybe what I've been involved with in the past. But it also comes with some awesome perks because you already get guys right that are academically very motivated, and they go to class, they do the right things, right? And then also on the mat and in terms of like weightlifting and that sort of thing, like they show up on time and they do what they need to do. And
they kind of have that. They already have that kind of. They kind of because of what they've done in high school, they might be a little bit more or a little bit less of a. I wouldn't say issue, but like you have to maybe not have to worry about them as much because that they've shown some of their academic, they can focus when they need to focus or whatever the case is. And being that you guys are Division III, right? NCAA D3, so that comes with its own challenges too, right? You guys like academic scholarships are kind of what you guys are able to give, right, on that level, right? I don't know if correct me if I'm wrong, but like athletic scholarships aren't a thing in Division III.
Correct. Yeah, your athletics, your athletic prowess, the academic athletic department has no bearing upon what you get financially. Correct.
Right. Okay. So I just find it so intriguing. You know what? I love doing these shows because I get to talk to coaches of different levels and, some of the stuff they struggle with, right? Like junior college versus D3 versus NAI versus, high school, things like that. And so like Division III is another intriguing one just because, there's a lot of really good talent there. I mean, it's not to discredit any other level outside of the Penn State level of wrestling or any sport. But it's like, what some of the things that you're able to, and this might be for like, if we get you on for another episode, like actually dive into like how you get these kids, but like, kids in today's world with social media and all this stuff, right? Like great. It's promoting sports at a higher level than it might have ever done, but they're probably seeing the high level wrestling schools, high D1s versus like anything below that, quote unquote. Right. So it's like, what are, as you're recruiting and stuff like that, is it a challenge to get kids to buy into a mini Ivy League for one, but also like I should say like a Division III school for one, but then also is it hard to get kids to be able to buy into like, oh, on top of that, we're a Institute of Technology, so we're essentially an Ivy League school.
Yeah, you're right. We are a mini Ivy League, and we're division. There's no question about that. That like it's already off the bat. there's only going to be a select number of kids that look at your school, right? They're either like engineers or they're business guys. Like that's pretty much it. We don't do humanities, right? Like that's just not what we do here. Not that you can't be a humanities major here, but it's just not what we do.
Right.
I think in my experience so far, it's really just been about staying on top of the kids that, you know, are reaching out to us consistently and want to be a part of this thing here. Like obviously, you know, I use my experience in the recruiting process a lot. I've been, you know, at the highest level, Division I, and then I was in Division II, and now I'm Division III. And like, I talk about the differences between all three of them, you know, and I try to bring it up in a way that I try to communicate and educate. Why Division III is an unbelievable opportunity. Again, I think this kind of goes back to, and I'm still close enough to my high school experience where I can kind of use it in the recruiting process a little bit. Like when I was 18, man, like I was not listening to anything. Right. I was D1 or bust. Like that. Right. In reality, in fact, even though I was a 2-time state placer in Pennsylvania, like I probably wasn't going to be a legitimate contender at a mid-major Division I school. Like you know, right. I probably would have been suited off for a Division II or a Division III school. And looking at the Division III, like I might have struggled at some of these top tier Division III schools coming out of high school. Like that's the level of competition that I kind of sort of try to talk about. Like that at the end of the day, when you graduate from Stevens, number one, you're going to have a degree that's going to hold some serious weight and depth in the professional world. That's number one. But number two, you're going to have an opportunity to be an All-American.
Right.
And at the end of the day, like when the boss looks at your resume, like they're not going to care if it says Division I or like they're going to see Stevens Institute Technology and academic All-American and or athletic All-American. And they're going to be like, yeah, we need this guy. We need this guy in our office. So that's kind of what I talk about. Like the Division III that I've experienced so far has the perfect balance. It has you can have your social life, you can have a serious academic experience and a very serious athletic experience, and you don't have to sacrifice one or the other.
Right.
Whereas, you know, in Division I, that at least in my experience, Power 5 football, like that wasn't the case. Like it was football all the time. And like, you know, if you did well academically, it was great, you know, but
no, I like that. I love that you were able to kind of pass that to people as you're recruiting. And I think that's huge. He was a huge asset to being a recruiter. But to kind of jump back into what you're mentioning about like, as you in your recruiting process or when you're recruiting kids, how you speak on things. I personally think that it's important for high school coaches as well to be on the same train, if you would, right? So I think high school coaches need to be able to do their research, especially if they're trying to get kids to the next level, only because, you know, not to dive in too deep, but like, you know, I only wrestled 1 year in high school before I got the opportunity, and I got, you know, I had more for wrestling that 1 year than I did for football after my whole time. And so that's why, you know, and then I had an opportunity to go wrestle in Arkansas Baptist, and now I think they're NAI now, but they were JUCO at the time. And I had, you know, like the big opportunity for me was, the opportunity to go wrestle at Adams State, the D2. And I took that one because looking back at high school, you know, my high school football coach was like, hey, you can go compete at the D2 level. So my head was like, yep, D2, that's where I'm trying to get to, you know, and I finally got there. So I'm like, yep, let's go. When realistically, as you mentioned, you know, like you were a placer in PA, like you could, like, and you don't know how you would have fared against other schools of, you know, whatever level it was, D2, D3. So it's like, I'm not saying I regret going to Adams State. Obviously, I don't. I learned a lot, and I appreciate everything, and Coach Ram took a chance on me. But I can say, like, for where I was at, I might have had a better opportunity to grow and maybe, you know, be able to go compete for that school a little bit better if I would have went to a JUCO first or whatever, right? So to kind of keep it short on my end, I think that high school coaches should do their due diligence on like, hey, I have kids who can go to the next level. But let me explain to these kids what each level kind of can do for them. Wherever they sit, right? Like the high school coaches know their GPAs. They know a little bit more than college coaches know right off the bat. And so they should be able to kind of do their quote unquote part of, hey, JUCO's this, D3 is this, NAI is this, 1, 2, right? And that hopefully will not only open up horizons for coaches in college to be like, hey, I'm a D3 and I don't have to fight over that initial wall, but also maybe opens up their minds to like actually pick up the phone call, right? And they could be like you, as you said, they might just be closed-minded. It's like, no, I'm only going here because this is what I know, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, if there's a few more people saying it, especially the people that they trust right off the bat, like, that they've grown with, it might open up the doors a little bit more. So I can appreciate you doing that still to this day to these kids and everything like that too,
Yeah, it's all about communicating and educating,
That's the big thing, is educating.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of finish up that, and I kind of ranted on that one. To kind of dive in a little bit more about you as the coach. People want to hear you; they don't want to hear me. So that's why you're on the show. I like to ask this question because you start getting into like the deeper coaching philosophies, I guess, of the show. How do you build a successful culture on the level of like buy-in and mindset when it comes to your coaching?
It's a great question. I think in my experience is, have to be able to get your athletes to know that you care a lot. And I think the one thing that's always stuck out with me is they don't care what you know until they know that you care. Mm. And that's always kind of where I start with somebody. It's really, really important for me when I first got here to, meet up with everybody that I possibly could in Hoboken that was living here, guys that were returning or whatever, and like get to know them and like take them out for dinner or take them out for a cup of coffee or like whatever, just like invest time in them.
Right.
Cause I do care about their development. And their success is really, really important to me. And then, it's been important for me here the first couple months also, like take guys out to lunch and like, just like have conversations with them. Right. And like crack a joke and
right.
That's kind of for me, like relationships are everything. And it's building super strong relationships where, hey, like, outside of the wrestling room and outside of like, this thing, like we're just going to be people, but I want you to hopefully see, that I care a lot, cause I'm also going to coach you really hard.
Right.
And, you might not like me at certain times, and that's okay. That's fine. But there'll be some growth. Like, I think it really just is relationships, like, and just getting to know the athletes and being the kind of coach that I really wanted when I was, maybe in my first half of my career, in the second half, like that kind of the amalgamation of both.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to, having a positive attitude, showing that you care, and, being there and not just being in their corner, but being in their corner for life.
Right. I gotcha. Do you think that, let me ask this question first and then I'll jump back to that, because I think that you have I really want to hear that question from you, but I want to get kind of an idea of how you think that you, or I should say, how do you build a successful program on the level of like wins and longevity, and then how do you sustain that?
That's a great question. I mean, anything that I say at this point would be, just in some sort of opinion, because I'm not in the driver's seat, in terms of a head coaching position.
Of course.
But I think things that I've learned the most are, your program is going to live and die by who you recruit and who you bring in. You're only going to be as good as the kids you recruit. And I think that's got to be number one. And then number two, the development of your athletes in every single area of their life, whether it be on the mat, whether it be in the classroom, whether it be in their personal lives, spiritually, like whatever, and pushing them, pushing them probably past the point that they want to be pushed.
Right.
And also being with them when they need you most. And making wrestling important on campus, making sure that wrestling is providing value to the campus. And that, I met your guys today and I love your guys. Your guys are awesome. That is like the best thing ever when I hear that from somebody on campus. Like, I just love your wrestlers. You guys are awesome. Being involved and connecting in that regard. And, like just trying to build an incredible staff that
it's important.
Probably like, you get a guy that like, I'm just thinking head coach mentality.
Of course. Yeah.
There's certain things that I'm good at and there's certain things I'm not so good at. And the person that I would want to hire, hopefully would be the person that's really strong in the areas that I'm really weak at.
Picks up your slack. Yep.
Correct. Not to say that I can't do those things. I just, somebody might be more effective than I am, but I also need to grow in that area too, being understanding and effective.
Right.
So it's throwing energy into every single facet of the program and getting parents involved, getting alumni involved, getting every single department on campus that you possibly can involved. That's going to help you. But I think it comes, in my short experience, it all has to have some sort of primary purpose. Like, what are we here doing? And for me, it's giving back what was freely given to me, which was an incredible wrestling experience that changed my life and in many ways maybe saved my life. Right. And to be able to do that for somebody else is why I do this every single day. And that, whatever that process looks like, the wins and the championships and the losses will be a byproduct of what it looks like when, that wrestling experience gets shared. Like you and I are having this experience talking about wrestling right now. Right. And then after this, like somebody's going to come in the office and like, we're going to have an experience. And like, it comes from face to face and it comes by spending a lot of time with somebody and getting to know them.
Right.
So I think that's, what are we here to do? We're here to help people.
Yep.
And cause if it's just about winning, it's going to be tough.
It's be tough. For sure. It is.
And not to say that winning is not important, because winning is really important. It is, right? But the ultimate vector for change is, how do we pour into these guys and they pour into themselves? And how do we all continue to elevate each other to be the best we possibly can be in every area of life?
Right. And do you think that, do you take any of those things, I should say all those coaches you were either under when you coached or played for, do you take some of those lessons or things that you learned and put them into your coaching now? And do you think that you'll forever, obviously you're always going to evolve, but do you take a lot of those things and utilize them to this day?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, my high school coaches that I had, just kind of showed me the path in a way. And were always very supportive of everything that I did. And then I think about like Coach Franklin and Coach Spence and Brent Pry, Coach Terry Smith, and Bob Shoop. Like, I just think about the way that they connected with us, and the strength coaches too, Chuck Losey, like Dwight Gall, like those guys spending a bunch of time with us, and like the kind of like the intensity. Like they were fiery guys. And like they were super competitive. Kind of took that a little bit. And then Pembroke, like OT, how to be there for your athletes. and kind of be a player's guy or a wrestler's guy or whatever you want to call it, like a player's coach. And Coach Gibbs at Baldwin Wallace, how to devote a ton of energy into every single part of your program all the time. And then now learning from Coach Bonaventura, he was in my role for 10 years under the old head coach. And we've had a really awesome relationship right from the bat, and
right.
Our vision's the same, our goals are the same. And like also learning from him too about, just like different strategies in the room that I've picked up on that maybe I didn't have before, and different things in the recruiting process that I didn't really have before. And also how to be like just super organized and very detailed. He's phenomenal at that. And I kind of had my own system before this, and I was like, wow, this is nothing compared to what this guy's got. So just learning about that too. Like, and he's helping me grow. He's helping me grow in so many ways, which has been really, really awesome.
And is that kind of like a long-term goal of yours to get to a head coaching job? Like, is that something that you see? I know you're taking in every moment as an assistant, which is, I don't think I really have to ask you if you are, but is that kind of like a long-term goal of yours, is to have a program of your own, whether it's where you're at now or, if opportunity ever came, that you'd consider doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I would like to be a head coach. I just, I don't know when that's going to be. Like, I know that's where I want to be, but I'll be there when I'm supposed to be. And, I'm good with that. After being a GA for 2 years, I applied for head coaching jobs, and, I might've been able to get some of them, but ultimately I knew that I needed another rung in the ladder, so to speak. I needed some more development. I needed to learn the ins and outs of everything before I took a full-time head coaching job. And I just wanted to do it the right way, because whenever I become a head coach, I want to be as prepared as I possibly can be, knowing that like when I get there, there's just certain things I'm going to learn on the fly. Right.
Of course.
Until you're there, like you're just,
you don't know until you're there. Yeah.
Correct. So, but can I, learn everything that I possibly can. And then, when that opportunity comes, I'm as prepared as I can be.
Right.
Cause I do believe in serious preparation. And I think that because we're talking about, and I don't mean to get long-winded about this, but, we're talking about young student athletes in their careers.
Yep.
We're talking about probably for a lot of people, or maybe most people, whatever, like they're the 4 most important years of your life. Like you're getting a degree, you're wrestling in college, you're meeting all these new people, you're in a new place, you're on your own. Right. Like, and I don't take that lightly at all. I really don't. And I don't want to be a head coach just to say that I'm a head coach.
Yeah, that you're there. Yeah.
Let's be effective. You know what I mean?
Right.
And as effective as we possibly can be. And am I going to make mistakes? Absolutely. I make mistakes every day, but can we minimize? Right? Like that's kind of where I come from that,
Yeah, I understand that. Do you think, let me ask you this, because I want to keep it light to before we end it, because the last question is pretty deep. I guess one of the other questions I'd like to ask is, is there any tips or advice you'd give to new or struggling coaches? And, I asked that question, to new coaches and old coaches who've been doing this for a long time, just because everybody has their ideas on how to get into coaching. But I think the thing here is like tips or advice to coaches who might be struggling, whether it might be getting their program right, building their culture, if it's a college coach, like recruiting, it could be kind of anything and everything that you might want to dive into. But like, what's some advice as like just a coach in general that you'd give to a new or a struggling one?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I probably, when I got into this as a student assistant, it was kind of a unique situation in that I was coaching my own teammates. So I kind of came in from that perspective. But I think, like this was really important for me early on. And I struggled on learning this in the beginning was like, why exactly are you, like the name of this podcast, right? The Coach's Why. Like why are you doing this? For me, it's not I'm never going to be rich, and I am okay with that. Like I really am. Like it doesn't bother me. And I'm probably never going to end up in the ESPN Plus documentaries, E60. Right. Like that. It is really for me about what are the needs of my athletes? What are the needs of Coach Bonaventura? What are the needs of the AD? What are the needs of the athletic department? What are the needs of the dining? Like, I mean, whoever it is on campus, right? Like athletic training, like rec facilities, like whatever. What are their needs and how can I meet them? Because that I have found that to be, that's a principle that goes back thousands of years, right? Like a man can't help himself unless he helps others.
Right.
And it's all about putting others first. And I don't know, I get a sense of peace and ease and comfort out of it. And I get energy from it. And I just love it. Like I really do. Maybe I'm all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at the age of 28 and whatever, right? But like,
you're 28. Okay.
28.
So I'm only a year older. I'm only a year.
There you go.
So maybe I'm not 2 or 3. I give me only a year. Okay, that's fair.
I redact my old man comment.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it, and I think that's why you and me. I think the first time we spoke on the phone too, we spoke for like well over an hour just talking on the phone too. I was assuming, and part of that was just because I was telling you my situation where I was at and stuff, and you obviously went into a little bit of detail about you, and we just ended up talking for X amount of time, however long that was, and each time. And I think, for you, I know that it sounds like you enjoy just kind of like talking about the sport and just in general, but also like answering questions about like, because I had some questions or whatever when we first talked, and I'm the same way. I enjoy listening and getting advice from people and just, picking people's brains. And I think that, like you said, going back, just a little bit ago about how you can't help yourself till you help others, that was, I felt that from you right away on the level of just like, I told you everything, blah, blah, blah. And you obviously I wanted to help you with athletes, but also you were talking to me about stuff that I had questions on or whatever. And, I thought that was really, really cool so I guess what I'm trying to get is like, I felt that whenever we first initially spoke too. So I like that. That's something that, it wasn't just a one-time phone call, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's like that's what you're living by as a coach. So I can definitely appreciate you being that person, even though the old man comment kind of got me a little off, whatever. But that kind of leads into the final question that I have for you based off of the podcast is, and you've already mentioned it. You just mentioned it like, a question or two ago, but I'm going to ask you directly. It's the name of the podcast is, why are you in this position? Why are you in this profession? Why do you coach? What's your coach's why?
Man, I coach I think my primary purpose in life and my primary purpose in coaching, what I do as a profession are the same. To give back what was freely given to me. And that's kind of how we get to keep like this sport of wrestling too, right? Like, you get coaches involved and people involved and they teach the next person and the next person. And that's how you get to keep this sport that we love. And that's what it is. Like I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the coaches and the administrators and the professors and the teachers that I had that really like molded me. That includes my family. That includes a lot of people. Because there's maybe coaches in your life that aren't necessarily like your wrestling or your football or your basketball coach.
Right.
But it is really, truly in my office at my apartment. There's a picture that I have at the desk that says, I'm here to give back what was freely given to me. And I take that into coaching, and I take that into my life. And it's all about helping other people. And listen, I am not a saint. Like, let's get that out of the way.
Right.
Like I make mistakes, and I ultimately own up to them, and I make amends. But it really is about other people, and loving other people, and sometimes being hard on them. Like that's part of it too.
Right.
And I would and I would also hope that those people are hard on me, and freaking, put my butt to the fire sometimes, which is fine. Right. Cause that's the way we're all going to get better here. But yeah, it's all about, what is our 125 pounder need? What does our heavyweight need? What does our 57 pounder? Like, what do these guys need? And like, how can I meet them? Every single time a guy comes in the office, maybe it's just like, hey coach, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And they leave, or, they're in a meeting with us as a staff or whatever. Like, one of the last things I always say is like, holler if you need something.
Yep.
As they're walking out the office, holler if you need something. Sometimes they go, huh? What? Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, no, like if you need something, like, just let me know. Like,
right.
And whatever that is, as long as it's not something, heinous or whatever. Right?
Yeah, ridiculous. Yeah. Hey, I need you to help me carry this body. Yeah, coach, I made a mistake last night.
Yeah, no, I don't know what to do for you there, brother. But like, whatever it is, like, is it a problem with your class? Is it a problem with this? Is it, I'm having trouble with my weight cut? Is it like I have, I can't get past this mental barrier in training or in live situations? And, all right. Like, I might not have all the answers either. That's the other thing I'm very clear about. But let's figure it out together.
Right.
Let's figure it out together, and let's see what happens. Right. And, it can only be good. Like at that point, right. And I'm also very vulnerable too. Like, I'm very vulnerable with the guys. Yeah. Well, what are your needs? Let's figure it out. Well, I might not have an answer on that right now, but let's go find somebody that does, and let's figure it out together.
Yeah. I think that goes a long way just in general though, right? Like anything I've done professionally too, whether it is coaching or, I was in sales for a long time. That was one thing that I learned, just to build a relationship with somebody. It's like, most people don't want to hear BS, right? They don't want to hear you BS them. So it's like, if I didn't have an answer for them, I'll be like, look, I actually don't, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know that answer right now, but let's figure it out. And that went way further than me trying to blow smoke and whatever that led to if I were to do that. So, hopefully those kids, the guys you're dealing with now and in the future, and anybody you've dealt with, whether they appreciate that now or they don't, just because, like you said, 18 to 21, right? 22, whatever the age they are, may or may not appreciate that. But maybe when they're 28, 30, 35, they can look back and be like, I remember that one time that I was struggling, blah, blah, blah. And coach, he was there for me, and that went so much further, so that hopefully goes a long way. So I can say this to you. I appreciate you jumping on here and talking. And if you guys are still listening, if you guys are on YouTube, make sure you guys HTB, hit that bell, like and subscribe, all the 9 yards. If you guys are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, which we are new to, PocketCasts, any of those things, make sure you guys leave a review, hit the stars, whatever you say with your chest, because we want to hear what you have to say. Coach, I have one more question for you, and this probably is going to come out biased, but I want to hear it. What state is the best wrestling high school state?
Oh, unequivocally, it's Pennsylvania.
PA. How did I know that was going to be
Pennsylvania?
Said?
I mean, I don't know what else to tell anybody. I mean, don't get me wrong, New York and New Jersey and, California, and they're starting to, and I would say the Illinois club scene also is fantastic, and Ohio too. But like Pennsylvania, just numbers of All-Americans, numbers of national qualifiers every year.
Hey, I'm not here to argue. I just wanted to get your opinion. I'm gonna start asking wrestling coaches that. You're the first guy I've asked that question to, and I think I'm gonna start asking that question because I just I don't know why I've never asked that question, but I just had to do it. Being your PA guy, I had to ask. So I think that's gonna be
Yeah.
something I start now.
I always
Just
bring it up as like just to like argue with guys. Sometimes be like, oh yeah, Pennsylvania, and then they're like, oh well, this like, well, it's all conjecture, really, right? But like,
right.
yeah, PA is, we'll see what the other coaches have to say. I'll be interested.
You know what I love about what you just did is this entire podcast episode. You were up here up front like this, and then as soon as I say something about PA, you're like, yeah, what can I say?
I mean,
hey,
the numbers don't lie.
Yeah,
Correct.
Numbers don't lie. But coach, I really appreciate you jumping on today. I thought it was a really, really good one, and I hope to have you back on here. Sometime whenever maybe season slows down, or maybe sometime after season, we can get you back on and talk a little bit more to you.
I appreciate it, Case, and thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity just to chat, and I look forward to getting to know you more, and can't wait to do this again, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I look forward to that time. And if you guys are still listening, as I said, thank you guys for tuning into this episode. I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Coach, thank you so much for getting on today. Peace.